Oh, our guest today is Sophia Xu. Sophia is Chief Scientific Officer at Carbon Bridge. Carbon Bridge is producing, we'll hear more about it during the episode. They are producing the world's thinnest bioreactors, making microbes 500% more productive at eating carbon dioxide and turning it into useful materials. In the conversation, we talk a lot about Sophia's personal journey, going from being a biologist at school to jumping headfirst into the startup space, how her company started literally from kind of back at the napkin coffee shop to $100 a month DIY biolab in New York. I think it's important to tell those stories. A lot of times very flashy, well-funded stories um, get put into the spotlight, but there's a very real experience that Sophia had going from DIY to well-funded startups. So that's important. She also talks a lot about her own experience with imposter syndrome, being second-generation immigrant and navigating, and a woman navigating the hard space of startups. Thank you, as always, to our partners, Clean Tech Growth Lab. If you're looking to do any type of growing in the clean tech space, these are the experts. And not only that, but they're wonderful people to work with. And if you're looking to grow in any other industry, looking to do any other growth activities, you're looking for Craze and Friends, the producers of this podcast. So thank you to them. And now for Sophia. Sophia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, this is so cool. What I want to say before we get into the technicalities is I already thanked you for making such an awesome product video on your homepage. But for anyone that's listening, they need to go to your website, and I just appreciate the music choice. I won't spoil it, but it definitely is not conventional, and I was in it the whole time. So before I get into any other questions about potentially how that video came about or anything else in the company, if you could give an introduction of yourself and what you're building.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm Sophia Xu. I'm the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Carbon Bridge. And we're revolutionizing the bioindustrial economy. And what we mean by that is not necessarily pharma and medicine, but the idea of using microbes to make everyday products from fuels and chemicals. And we do it with a twist. We're taking gases from waste as the input. We've got these microbes that, have been evolved since nature, so they're incredibly efficient. And we have built the most kind of productive environment for them to operate in. So for anyone in biotech, we're just building a novel bioreactor from scratch. And our microbes are very happy and they can make, renewable fuels and chemicals at fossil parity without any subsidies and without any credits.
So before we get into your more about your personal journey, I just want to get a little bit more explanation because though I was taken by the production of the video, with my background, I didn't understand 100% what the product is and what you guys are doing. So, can you just describe, I don't know, one use case of where, because I understand that they're the thinnest ever and they're flat and they're bioreactors like you're saying, but if you could just explain in context what they do.
Yeah. So let me take you back a little bit, a couple of steps. So fermentation, has been around for thousands of years, right? And it's like the way that we make wine and beer, right? So we know that it works very well. But essentially what you have is you have this like massive tank and you've got microbes that are swimming around in solution, right? So for example, you have yeast, you feed them sugar, and then they make alcohol for you. What we've done is we're working in the realm of gas fermentation. So it's no longer sugar that's the food for these microbes, it's gases. Think like methane, CO2, hydrogen, the gases that are really important for climate change. Um, and traditionally, what they've done for gas fermentation is they've taken the exact same tank, but they're trying to mix gases and liquids. And I don't know if you've ever like, opened a can of Coke and it like overflew, right? And it spilled over. But it's
Or
because,
definitely.
yeah, absolutely, right? So it's because, gases don't like to stay in liquid, right? Like unless you like bubble it or do all these different things, like mixing gas and liquid's actually really hard. And that's just a physics challenge. That's just, gas solubility and that type of thing. So you end up with microbes that have been starving. And I think the industry has long blamed these microbes for not being performant. But if you really look at what's going on, it's just they don't have access to the gases they need to do the conversion. So the product that we're building isn't just the flattest, isn't just the thinnest, but it's essentially putting these microbes in this environment where they have access to all the gases they could eat. So instead of going from like starvation, they went to an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? And they can eat all the gases, and then now they can perform at margins that are actually economical for competition. So we haven't changed anything about the microbe. These microbes are amazing. They've been framed this entire time. We've just given them the resources they need to perform.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Obviously, a trillion more questions, but I do want to get into, so how long have you personally been with the company unofficially, officially? How did it, let's start with this. Is this your first company?
This is the first company that I'm a founder of, yes.
Would you say this is your first experience with startup space or entrepreneurship?
Definitely not. In college was really interested in entrepreneurship, but I didn't go to one of the, not like Stanford, Berkeley, where it's like startups were a norm. So I had no idea that, a founder of my age could be a deep tech founder, but I still had like my baby of a project that I, got grants for, did pitches for. I just never took it to that next step. But then coming out of college, I had graduated a year early, so I had some time to explore. And then I was at an early stage ag tech, biotech startup, and it was just me and the CEO. So that was like a real taste of early stage biotech. And then I came to Carbon Bridge. So had some early experiences, which I think are so critical if you're looking to be in the startup space, especially early stage, like sub 10 people, really, really important.
So how did so the two experiences that you referenced were doing the research and then also experiencing like, hey, we need funding in order to do this. So having that be a piece of it, not just doing the research part, and then also an extremely early stage ag tech startup. Well, between those two experiences, let's just say, well, to frame it, how many years now has it been with Carbon Bridge?
So about 2.5 years. So it started in March 2023.
All right,
Uh,
great.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you could just let's just say between the research and between the early stage ag tech, what are the two experiences that stand out to you that have impacted the way that you've navigated building Carbon Bridge?
Yeah. I think one thing that was really important to me, and I also have another team member who really contributed to this thesis. I'm going to shout her out in a little bit. But the idea of being able to do biology cheaply. I think in pharma, it makes a lot of sense. You need certain sterility, certain controls, things like that. You're making very high margin like molecules, right? That you sell for a lot of money. But in the kind of bioindustrial economy, being able to, for example, to work at a lab, build a product, and do it with not that much capex investment, not that much opex investment, right, is really important because, especially in today's world, like investors, especially when they're looking at another AI startup, for example, they want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth. So, the very first ag tech biotech that early stage startup that I was at, like we were ordering things off of Amazon, consumables and pipettes and doing things like that. And I had no idea that you could do biology like so cheaply. And I think that was a huge part of, when I got started in Carbon Bridge, I moved to New York. I found
Gotcha.
this DIY community biolab for $100 a month. It's called Biotech Without Borders. It was this insane experience, but we didn't have enough like family friends funding to really be able to go into this nice spiffy lab. And so we got started in much of the same way. So I think um, being extremely resourceful, like I think I found that lab off of Reddit, and actually the founder of that lab is now our VP of biotech. So she's done a very great job. She's
Nice.
on a journey, Ellen Jorgensen, she's on a journey to democratize biology. Um, and we would not have been able to get started any other way.
Gotcha. So when For you personally, did you ever see, like when you were younger, did you say, I want to grow up and start my own company. I want to be in biology. Like at what point did you think that this type of lifestyle is something that called you?
I think I was always fascinated by entrepreneurship, but again, kind of had like a limiting belief that I was like, you absolutely need a PhD to get involved, and then you need to have these results first, and then raise funding and do all these different things. So, I didn't have the traditional, I think, Silicon Valley type of risk appetite or understanding of how startup ecosystems could actually function. I didn't have that kind of mentorship until I went to that first startup. Um, so I think that spirit was always in me. And that's also why I was formerly pre-med, but ended up deciding to go with Carbon Bridge because I was just so interested in the startup ecosystem. But I think what confirmed it later on for me was we were part of this program called Indie Bio. And it's essentially like an accelerator program, kind of akin to like YC, but for the biotech space. Really, really involved. And they do these things called journey talks every Friday, where a founder comes in and they just talk about their journey. So Sean O'Sullivan, he's the founder of the venture firm, SOSV, and he came in and gave his journey talk, and it was so interesting. And I was like, this is obviously there were some, he went through a lot. But I think that kind of solidified that I was like on the right path. Like I wanted to do something non-traditional. I wanted to build impact. I didn't want to just be in a lab. I wanted to see it translate into kind of
Mm.
real world solutions. Um, and I wanted it to be very interesting and hectic, to put it that way. So I think, I had that confirmation a bit later on.
Where how has the experience then since you saw that talk, how's the experience been relative to any expectations you had, if you had expectations?
I had expectations. I had a plan. Nothing goes to plan. We've been crazy. Like past 2 years have hopped from like a friend's couch to like random sublets. Still don't have a lease to my name, kind of ordeal. Um, but it's high highs, low lows. But that's kind of what at the fundamental basis, what I was going.
Well, I really appreciate what you said about there's a common at least I think it's common, and you did note it, that people think they need a certain level of accreditation to begin something or get involved with something that's in a meaningful way. And I'm glad that you pointed out that that's not necessarily the case. So I think that's important. Uh, yeah. So back to then the questions that I had about what you guys are doing. So, um, and if I understand it correctly about the whole process between the microbes digesting the gases, the buffet, all of these things, how is it that the gases can act like sugar? And also, how is it that this hasn't been developed before?
Yeah, so I would say that's nature's innovation. These microbes literally, like the ones that were working, they like to eat methane, like the same, cow farts essentially, right? And then they can make fuel out of that, and that's just part of their metabolic process. There are microbes that will take CO2 and hydrogen, right? These are not necessarily microbes that we've genetically engineered to be able to do this, although there are certain microbes that are,
Sure.
but nature has kind of already evolved these mechanisms to take gases. But again, the reason why we haven't seen them before is not because those microbes didn't exist, but because we didn't have the right infrastructure to be able to harness those capabilities and harness them in an economical manner. So there are loads of companies, gas fermentation, that have been, tweaking microbes and these gas eating microbes and doing different things, but they use the same kind of fermenter, same kind of bioreactor vat as the ones used in wine and beer, and they just couldn't make the economics work. So that's why we focused on infrastructure and not the micro.
Got it. And so let's take it as like your little journey discussion. So at the start, around 2.5 years ago, how would you describe where the company was at and what your
Yeah,
involvement was?
we frequently say that everything that we've done today spun out of a coffee shop because it was me meeting the CEO at South by Southwest in a coffee shop and just kind of laying out the groundwork for the future of the company. Um, I will note that Carbon Bridge was actually founded in 2021, not 2023. But my co-founders Manu and Bill, they looked at everything, they're engineers, everything from kind of like soil carbon to syngas to all these different things. And they spent a lot of good work learning what not to do and what didn't make sense before they landed on, okay, it has to be biology, and then it has to be liquid fuels like methanol, for example, for the maritime shipping industry. So that's kind of the basis, and they were like, okay, this is what it has to do. And then Manu, my co-founder, he approached me and was like, hey, you're a biologist, would love to know your thoughts on this. And then we came together, and so it was essentially like a complete rebirth in 2023. And we started from literature review, like started from absolutely, like, I had no fermentation background. I knew microbes. I've been working with microbes for a while, but fermentation wasn't my expertise. So I went straight to the literature. Um, and then we discovered the bottleneck, being the gases, right? How can these microbes eat? And then we kind of built and built and built from there. So a very exciting journey. And it definitely had some ups and downs, but
Yeah. So if the beginning, so let's just say it's the beginning because you said it
sure.
was a rebirth. It is. It's the beginning. It's where Carbon Bridge happened. So if you describe the first phase of it as the dive into the literature, then what would be like the next milestone that you would say like this is the end and the beginning of the next phase?
Yeah, so we did our background research, right? I was in coffee shops looking at the literature. My co-founders, engineers, they were also taking kind of an engineering perspective. And then we had to build like a spreadsheet, like a techno-economic analysis, a TEA, to be able to convince ourselves that this would be economical, right? And are these values reasonable, right? Do we think that the microbes can operate at this productivity, stuff like that? And then we had a decent amount of conviction, and then I would say a strong amount of conviction, obviously. And at the time, I was working a corporate job, actually. I was like I was the phone booth of this life sciences protein company. And so I finished my first, my work in the first hour and the last hour, and the rest of the day was spent on like Carbon Bridge. And so when we had gone to that point of conviction and we raised, a small pool of kind of like family and friends amount of money, we were like, okay, let's get the first proof point, which is, are we the team that can execute and actually make these microbes, take gas and convert into product, right? That
So
was the first step.
so how long then between whatever you guys met in the coffee shop and when you had that, would you say a TEA?
Yes, a TEA, yeah.
So when you had that documentation and then you raised family and friends money, about how long in between those two?
I don't know to the point where we got
Roughly.
today, but I know we had enough conviction to the point where I moved from Texas to New York, and that was in July. So basically, March to July was the whole background research, raised some funds. Manu funded my trip to New York with some
Got
credit
it, got it.
cards, and then got started at a lab. So that was when we actually started doing some real experiments.
Okay, so roughly 6 months.
Yeah,
5, 6 months.
yeah. March to July.
So
For
what is that? 4 months. Okay, cool. Okay, great. Well, all right. So this is awesome. Okay, so we're doing it. You flew across. You guys had conviction. You said we're gonna be the ones that do this. We have an idea. This is gonna be revolutionary. This is great. Uh, let's just before we talk about the next phase, like what would you say is the next milestone? Like are you still in that next phase now, or was there another milestone that you reached?
No, so we got our first, indication, like first proof of concept that we could make methanol, which is
Great.
right out of methane gas, which is really cool. And then from there we got our first VC investor for Carbon Bridge, at least the bio portion, and that was SOSV, Indie Bio. So we got into that accelerator. But I would say the next major proof point was building our reactor and then showing that So we showed that the biology worked. Yes, confirmed that these microbes can make fuel from gas. And then the second part was, can we improve upon it with this novel infrastructure that we're building? So we built the next reactor, and then we had to show that the microbes would operate better, like would have a higher productivity. And so that I think was the next major proof point. So right now, our microbes are about 500% better. I don't think we've hit their limit, but that's kind of where we're at with that proof point. Um, the next phase of the company is we've got a proof of concept going with New York City, the
Okay.
waste treatment facility there.
Awesome.
And so essentially we,
How long
have
ago was that?
that was, I think we got that like maybe a month or two ago.
Oh,
Um,
congrats.
yeah, thank you. And then we have to pass the reviews, but then we would be allowed to deploy a pilot project on New York City's wastewater facility. So
Cool.
that will be very cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's very clear. This is awesome. Okay. So then again, just to review, so coffee shop, four, because I can do math now, 4 months, 5 months between. Now you have you've convinced yourselves that this is worth jumping into. And then between the proof of concept, between you moving and the proof of concept was also a few months of work
Yeah.
before your first investment. And so was that at the beginning of last year, beginning of 2024?
No, that was July 2023. I moved to New York and we got our first kind of bit of methanol in, I want to say August, July, August, around that area. And then we got our first SOSV came in as an investor um, September, October.
Amazing. So then it's been pretty much 12 months since that point.
2023 to now,
Oh, 2023. Sorry. So it's almost 2 years.
yeah, almost 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So and thank you again for clarifying all this because what I know what I really wanted to get at is post that initial investment for you personally for your journey in the company as CSO, doing the research, leading these experiments and things like this. What has been the experience since getting that funding? What is it like? What are you doing? Is it more so day to day? You're in there doing research, all this stuff. How often is it different things other than research? What was unlocked for you once you got that first round of funding? Those types of things.
Yeah. So we expanded the team a little bit, so I wouldn't have to be in the lab all the time. So at the
Okay.
start, I was mostly in the lab, doing everything from like ordering, lab managing, analysis, everything was more
Okay.
on me for the bio side. So I got, two team members essentially, and they've been a huge help. So now I'm a little bit out of the lab and I'm back to looking more for innovations and also helping fundraise and do all these other different things for the company.
Okay.
I think the major also unlock with the capital was um, access to equipment. Like things like being able to measure methanol requires $100,000 equipment that we weren't just going to buy ourselves. And IndieBio and SOSV, they kind of have this amazing program where they give you a lab and you're able to operate in that lab, and they have some really high quality equipment available. So that was also a major unlock. And then SOSV has a really great reputation, and obviously their team is amazing. So beyond kind of the personal development, having access to their network is huge. So it kind of paved the way for future conversations of next round of funding, right? And things like that. So, I huge respect to IndieBio and Hacks, these programs from SOSV that have, really propelled us forward.
Huge respect. Thank you. Thank you all so much. That's super cool. Okay, so then okay, so we ran through operationally what your role has been, how it's evolved for you, things like this. So for you personally, so going back, we did say that, ups and downs, like it's been all over the place, like did not meet expectations whatsoever. I mean, what's even the point? So from where you're at now, looking back on the last 2.5 years, what what is the journey been for you, growing as a CSO to whatever capacity you understand a CSO to be.
I would say it was massive character development. Um, when we first started the company, I was like 21. I'm like 24 now. And everything from like imposter syndrome, right? Kind of dealing with the fact that, am I the right person to be able to do this? That's part of the reason why I wanted to do the proof of concept and see like, can I build a team that can actually make this happen? To being able to talk to investors and improve on science communication, right? You can't go, investors come from a bunch of different backgrounds, some operators, some more technical, right? So how do you communicate the technology correctly, even to like sales, right? How do you sell a product? Whether it's you're selling stock to an investor or selling a product, you need to sell. As helping more and more in the fundraising process. So I think the more and more you kind of touch the different parts in the company, um, the more you the more is required of your personal growth, your maturity, your responsibility. I'm very lucky to have my co-founder and CEO Manu. He's a mentor to me, for sure, and he is quite a bit older than I am, so he has a lot of different experiences. And yet he also makes me feel very seen and heard, right? So our voices are almost equal, and I think being in that kind of environment, being surrounded by a lot of really incredible people, sometimes being the youngest in the room, I've learned a lot. um, so I think like that's the one thing I love so much about startups. It's like you've never accelerated your growth so much until you've been at an early stage startup.
So I guess I've two follow-up questions then based on what you just said. The first one is like you mentioned sometimes being the youngest in the room. What has your experience been being trying to grow this company and showing up to these different spaces as often the youngest in the room?
Yeah, it can be tough. I think at the first, like it's a little more terrifying. It's a little more like imposter syndrome, and I'm the type of person who does definitely prefers to listen first than to talk. And a lot of that is also because like the people around me have so much more experience. But as you build your own confidence, you realize you have a seat in the room for a reason, and you're invited into these things for a reason. So there's still a huge amount of learning. Um, Obviously, I think a lot of learnings I haven't like also fully realized as well and captured into fully formed a syllabus
Sure,
or something, right?
sure,
Um,
sure.
but it's I think it's overall a great thing to be in rooms with like these incredible people.
Yeah. So then, similar question. What would you say to your experience in the space as a woman founder?
Yeah, yeah. I would say I'm very fortunate that I'm surrounded. I haven't necessarily seen a paucity in woman founders or like woman, leadership. I think New York City is such a diverse city as well, and the companies that are formed um aren't necessarily so dominated in one specific sector or area. So I think I'm very lucky. But I do recognize that it is a bit harder. I think one of the challenges that we face as a founding team is, both me and Manu, different ages, don't have, PhDs, so different educational backgrounds, right? We don't look like your typical founding team. So maybe less so on like the fact that I'm a woman, but our makeup, I think required a few key believers to get us forward. But that's always the case. You have the believers, you gain more traction, and then you get more and more believers, right?
So then, with those two things in mind, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, is whether someone's considering being a founder and they're young, whether
Mhm.
someone's considering being a founder and they're a woman, whether they're both or neither. What advice, any types of things that you wish you knew or that somebody had told you when you had started this journey?
I would say if you're considering to be a founder, definitely work at an early stage startup first. Like again, sub 10 people is where you really get the sense of what that entire life looks like. Especially if you're in the deep tech space, I think it's a little bit more challenging. So getting those key experiences, you might find that you don't like it as much, right? Or um, that this is exactly where you want to be. I think that's incredibly important. And then the other thing is, even though you're young, I think there's a lot of expertise that you can fill by building out a team, right? So you're not going to have every single bit of experience, but if you can build a well-rounded team, I think that's equally important, right? So Imposter syndrome is very real, but I would very much encourage more. Like, I love to see people take um, more risks, especially in kind of the second gen immigrant community. I feel like a lot of us are pushed more towards paths of assimilation, whether it's like medicine, law, these types of like very grounded roles. And there's so many smart people out there. I would love to see more youth in deep tech and pair with a great co-founder. Like my co-founder is amazing. So we make a very, very great team. We cover different aspects. So I think it's a very wonderful experience, but be strategic.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I think just in the sense, just along the theme of taking your experience and helping other people feel inspired to do the same. Then you mentioned that you're second gen immigrant. Is there anything specific to your experience as a founder in that way? Different barriers that present themselves, like you just said.
Yeah, I would say, I had a very strong path forward to medicine.
Okay,
I still am very interested in kind of medicine and everything, learning about the human body. I think it's incredibly fascinating. Um, but my parents were definitely not super enthused when I veered away from that path, and I think that also caused quite a bit of trouble at the end, or sorry, at the start where I was making decisions. Um, I know a lot of my friends are in finance and like these more established roles, and they're doing it also for stability and for their families, right? And
sure.
that, and of course, everyone has different obligations. They come from different backgrounds,
Yep.
but I also know a lot of them wish they were in maybe a little bit more impactful and exciting careers. So, um, yeah, I would just say take a risk, take a bet on yourself, and also really try and kind of learn as much as you can about startups and being at that early stage before you take a full jump. I think that's totally valid, and it was really important for me as well in my journey.
Got it. Well, bonus question. You're just a fountain of knowledge right now. So I have three more for you, other than the,
Sure.
the normal two that I do. And it's because you mentioned about building a team, how impactful that can be, how underutilized that type of, how much expertise you could fill by doing that. So is there anything that you would speak to as far as building a team from your experience doing it, whether things you've done well or mistakes you've made?
Yeah, I think team wise, your first 10 employees are so, so critical. Like they basically form kind of the genetic makeup of your company culture and the future of which you're headed, right? So you want to be very selective, not in terms of just the expertise they bring, right? But also the personality and the character that they bring. So I think we've been fortunate to have in such an amazing team that has really gone through some very tough hardships, but are also so believing in the future and kind of the impact of the company that they've stuck it through, right? And we work very, very well together. So my advice I would say is um, think about how each person would contribute to the company culture and what kind of company culture you want to create. And make sure that the people you bring on, no matter how smart they are, they have to align with that culture because that can really make or break a company at some point.
Has it always been clear what you need to hire for, or have you had to make a subjective call?
I think this is something that I really believe in. We started out with more generalist. Like again, I said I don't have a fermentation background, but I have more of like a first principles type of thinking. Um, and I would say a lot of our, early team, or a team of six right now, is similar. Fast learners, very hard workers, may not necessarily have the exact expertise that we were looking for, but then again, we're building something so new that we don't expect someone to have that background.
Got
But
it.
what I care about is, how do you think? So we started with generalists. I think we're moving more towards a specialist nature. So recruiting some more specialists. And I think that's a really great way to go because when you start your company, there's a lot of different hats that you have to wear. You have to be extremely flexible. Um, and you have to be able to do all these different tasks that are not so, one sector focused.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of how we built our company. But I think more and more it's very clear, like we have this project in mind. We need these type of engineers and these type of biologists on this,
Got
and
it.
that's what we're recruiting for. So that becomes more and more specialized, right?
Huge. All right. Well, we got two more. My first one is, what is the biggest hurdle that you would say you're facing at the moment, and how is it also an opportunity?
Yeah, I would say funding is very difficult in the current environment, especially for things like climate tech. We've climate proofed our company quite a bit. Obviously, the mission and the impact stays the same, but there have been some headwinds, kind of geopolitically, and economically as well, that were not necessarily our fault, but it's just a function of building in this current time. So funding has been really difficult. I know rounds are taking longer to close. I know a lot of companies have unfortunately shut down. But I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We've gotten a lot of interest. I'm very confident in that. And then I would say that's the biggest challenge. But I think we've passed it. And now it's just about building, and it's about building in time and moving as quickly as you can.
Nice. Well, with all of this left to do, with all of these challenges, Sophia, I'm curious, what inspires you?
I love the solution that we're working on. I think that it almost reverses kind of a lot of the reputation that biotech has accumulated, which is like biotech can only be used for pharma and expensive things. Otherwise, biotech fails and things don't scale up. And I think it's just the kind of interdisciplinary approach of our solution that I really appreciate. And I love that we're going to be able to work with different microbes, almost kind of in a full circle, like we use this microbe to make this product, like the impact and kind of using bio in a very smart, more nature inspired way is something that I really enjoy. My vision, my personal vision for the company is not that we grow to this insane, massive headcount, but we still, we have a core R&D team. We're constantly, evaluating microbes, taking new microbes pathways in, is it economic? Almost doing kind of the background search that we did at the very start of the company back in March. Evaluate these new microbes, do the initial tests. Is this something that is, productive, and should we kind of import that um, into our pathways, right? So we've got one to go from methane to methanol. Maybe another that will go from oils to biosurfactants. Another one that will take CO2 and make vinegar, right? All these different microbes, but it keeps it very exciting, and it kind of maximizes the impact. So I'm very excited. I think a lot of the kind of bio-industrial side of biotech has been a little bit archaic in terms of infrastructure and things like that. And so I really love what we're doing for kind of this next on the frontier of innovation for biotech.
Awesome. Well, if anyone else was inspired to follow along or connect, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, our website is great. Thank you for shouting out our YouTube video.
Yeah.
We, happy to get in touch and fill out a form there. Of course, LinkedIn is also really great. So, um, Carbon Bridge has a LinkedIn. Our website is www.carbonbridge.io. I'm always happy to personally connect on LinkedIn as well. So these are great touch points for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for trying. Good luck with the pilot. That's really awesome. Is there anything else you guys are looking forward to in next 4 6 months, or is that the main focus?
I think we have some very exciting partnerships. We've sold our first couple reactors.
Nice.
Sold our first reactor. We've got some more lining up. And I think we'll have a very exciting announcement about our fundraise very soon.
Awesome. And I do have a note to shout out one of your team members, and that never happened. So who was that?
Dr. Ellen Jorgensen, she's like the founder. She made the very first community biolab in the world. So she's amazing. And then of course my CEO, Manu, he is so incredibly smart.
Shout out.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Sophia. Thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to staying in touch, seeing where you guys go, and doing another one of these.
Yeah, thanks so much. Like this is my first podcast, so really super.
Woo!
Yeah, thank you for introducing me to this world, and thank you for the time.
You got it.